Hello, I'm Liz Reynolds, and I'm the Executive Director of MIT's Task Force on the Work of the Future. I'm delighted to welcome you this morning to our fourth annual AI and the Work of the Future Congress. This is sponsored by the Task Force, MIT's Initiative on the Digital Economy, as well as the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab. We have a very full and interesting day for you ahead. We're going to start with some remarks from MIT's President, Rafael Reif.
Thank you, Liz. And to all of you, good morning, and thank you for joining us. Today's program features a superb set of speakers, and for that, I'm grateful for the leadership of three pioneering groups at MIT, our Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab, the Initiative on the Digital Economy, and the MIT Task Force on the Work of the Future. Yesterday, after 2 years of wide-ranging research, the Task Force released its final report. So I would also like to express my deep gratitude and admiration to everyone involved in this important project, including Task Force co-chairs David Odor and David Mindell, Executive Director Liz Reynolds, all the members of the task force representing a spectrum of academic fields, and the distinguished members of the task force advisory boards. Thank you all. I'm certain that your findings and recommendations will enrich the national conversation as we consider the kind of society we hope to build. And I very much hope that they will inform and perhaps shape the policies of the incoming administration and the new Congress. To help frame today's conversation, I would like to offer some context for how the task force came to be. But first, in this pandemic moment, when it can be difficult to focus clearly on the future, I find today's speakers particularly inspiring. That is not because they promise easy answers, because they do not. But I find myself inspired by their thoughtful, rigorous research, the real-world insight, and above all, by their confidence that we can make a difference, that we can together design a future of work that works better for everyone. That spirit has been central to the task force from the start. In 2017, we saw that the American people were increasingly worried about a future in which robots and computers could perform many human jobs. And the worst part seemed to be the sense of powerlessness, the worry that automation is coming to get us automatically. As president of an institute with technology in its name and national service in its mission, I hate to take those concerns very seriously. And there were large open questions. Would this technological revolution be like those in the past, with many jobs lost, but many better jobs created? Or would this time be different? Would the changes be so rapid and far-reaching and their impact so uneven and disruptive that it would threaten the stability of society itself? And above all, what, if anything, could we do to shape the outcome? No matter who I asked, I heard no convincing answers. There were many strong opinions, but relatively little research. So from my point of view, the next step was obvious. The provost and I asked some thoughtful people from across MIT to work with other thoughtful people from across the country and the globe to help us understand what is happening in our society and what actions and policies could make a positive difference. So that's how the MIT Task Force on the Work of the Future got started. And we will hear today what they have learned in the past 2 years and what steps they recommend now. Before we dive into those findings, let me offer this last thought. We will hear a great deal today about how society can shape the work of the future through both public policy and private business practices. Those levers are important, but I believe that those of us who are technologists and who educate tomorrow's technologists have a special role to play. In the past, many technologies that MIT has championed involved machines acting in society. By contrast, technologies like AI represent machines acting upon society. But we know that technologies embody the values of those who make them. For a place like MIT, this creates a special responsibility. It means that while we are teaching students in every field to be fluent in the use of AI strategies and tools, we must be sure that we equip tomorrow's technologies with equal fluency in the cultural values and ethical principles that should ground and govern how those tools are designed and they are used. And it also means that we are strongly committed to helping the United States maintain its leadership in these advanced technologies. Because those nations that act now to help shape the future of AI will shape the future for us all. One thing is abundantly clear from the task force report. Automation is transforming our work, our lives, our society. Fortunately, the harsh societal consequences that concern us all are not inevitable. How we design tomorrow's technologies and the policies and practices we build around them will profoundly shape their impact. Whether the outcome is inclusive or exclusive, fair or laissez-faire, is up to us, all of us. This is not someone else's problem. It's up to those of us advancing new technologies to help make certain that they do not wind up damaging the society we intend them to serve. Getting this right is among the most important and inspiring challenges of our time, and it should be a priority for everyone who hopes to enjoy the benefits of a society that is healthy and stable because it offers opportunity for all. For the leadership in this effort, I'm deeply grateful to the task force members and to the members of their advisory boards for their ongoing efforts to invent a future of work that can work for our whole society. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, CSAIL Director Daniela Rus, who will provide an important perspective on the current landscape in technology and the nature of work. Daniela?
Hello, everyone. We are here today to talk about AI and the future of work. And I have to admit, it feels like a strange moment to be focused on the future when the present looms so large in our minds. COVID-19 has disrupted practically everything about our world, where we work, how we live, who we see, and even how we're holding this meeting. The loss of life has been staggering, and even for those who've stayed healthy, the economic effects have taken a huge toll. While it's hard to pinpoint global unemployment, the UN International Labour Organization estimated that in the second quarter of 2020, COVID-19 cost the equivalent of 305 million full-time jobs and 1.6 billion informal economy workers around the world could suffer massive damage to their livelihoods. Governments have taken steps to support these displaced workers, but in many cases, these steps aren't enough. As the Washington Post puts it, the economic collapse sparked by the pandemic is triggering the most unequal recession in modern US history, delivering a mild setback for those at or near the top and a depression-like blow for those at the bottom. COVID-19 has brought many of the inequities of our economic systems front and center, but it has also highlighted some bright spots that have the opportunity to improve the lives of many. One of those bright spots is the rapid development of new technology. As Microsoft's Satya Nadella, who will speak later today, said, many institutions have gone through 2 years' worth of digital transformation in 2 months. That's happening at both an individual and collective level. Just think about it. How many people do you know personally who've had to change the way they work over the last 8 months? Who've had to learn new tools or make a Zoom call for the first time? That includes people of every generation, kids attending schools virtually, employees working from home, and even retirees who are using these tools to stay in touch with friends, family, and grandchildren. Healthcare facilities learned to deliver care via telemedicine, with one estimate showing that virtual visits skyrocketed from 13,000 visits a week to 1.7 million by the end of April. Schools and universities had to do a lot of learning themselves to figure out how to deliver virtual instruction to students of every age. And any company that relies on business-to-business sales had to reconsider how to use a sales force that could no longer meet in person with customers, often shifting their workforce and often focusing on new digital sales tools like live chat and digital ordering. These organizations used the crisis as an opportunity to rethink and reinvent. And history tells us that that's what usually happens during major crises. Now, I've been thinking a lot about Isaac Newton lately. Like many of us, Newton had to spend an extended period working from home during a pandemic, in his case, the bubonic plague. Later in life, he credited this time as hugely important to his breakthroughs in the laws of gravity, motion, and calculus. And I think there is a lot we can learn from his example as individuals and as a society. Change is happening. So how do we seize the moment to drive technology forward and ensure the benefits are distributed fairly across society? Because this is the same question we need to ask as we consider AI and its impact on the future of work. While pop culture does a great job scaring us into thinking that AI will take over the world, in truth, today's AI systems are quite limited in their ability to reason, make decisions, or interact reliably with people and the physical world. Because of these limitations, AI is most effective when paired with humans, not in place of them. When humans and computers work together, they do things that neither could do alone. Just consider the search for the COVID-19 vaccine. AI has shaved months, even years off the research timelines. Yet AI can't replace the work of humans in testing those vaccines with thousands of scientists, healthcare workers, and participants working toward this effort. As AI systems continue to improve, we'll see more and more examples of humans and machines working together across every type of industry, from retail to banking, mining to healthcare, and everything in between. So that begs the question, is technology destined to add to the insecurity so much of our workforce is already experiencing? Well, the answer is complicated, but I want to suggest two key differences from today that should offer us some hope. First, advances in technology create jobs along those they replace. There is no denying that technology is today already replacing human labor in certain tasks, and this trend will continue. But history also shows us that new technology often creates new types of jobs that are difficult to imagine. We were not imagining any social media jobs in 2000. And yet today, this is an active industry sector with roles that involve a wide variety of skills. In fact, in a 2017 report, McKinsey estimated that jobs related to developing and deploying new technology will grow by 20 to 50 million jobs globally by 2030. But the existence of jobs isn't in itself good news. We also need workers with the skills necessary to do those jobs. And we know that's a huge gap. McKinsey estimates that 14% of workers globally will have to change occupations or have their jobs significantly transformed. And many of those workers won't have the knowledge nor experience necessary to make that transition unless we change that. And that's the second major difference from where we are today. We couldn't predict this pandemic, but we can predict the impacts that technology will have on the global workforce, and we can put structures in place to manage those impacts. In the MIT report, we highlight 4 types of actions that can address the transformation of the workforce: education and training, matching jobs to seekers, creating new jobs, and providing counseling and financial support to people as they transition from old to new jobs. Now, I don't want to understate the challenge we're facing. We're talking about many millions of jobs around the world, but the key players, businesses, organizations, and governments have the resources necessary to meet this challenge, and we can create the political will to do so. History tells us that pandemics take a huge toll on humankind. but they also make us rethink what's important, and they are followed by great growth. Remember that after the bubonic plague came the Renaissance, and after the Spanish flu came the roaring 20s, and women were empowered to vote. So what will come after COVID-19? Well, this is our wake-up call. Technological disruption can offer explosive growth, but this needs to be done in a responsible way. As we look around the world, it's clear that inequality, poverty, the health of humankind, and even the health of the planet are major challenges that cannot wait to be addressed any longer. Every one of us has a role to play in becoming part of the solution. This year has shown us just how agile people can be when faced with daunting challenges. We're capable of learning and evolving if given the right support. So let's make that our mission. And let's decide that when we look back on 2020 and ask, are we better off today? The answer will be yes for everyone. And with this, I'd like to turn it over to Liz Reynolds to continue the conversation and to tell you more about our program.
Thank you, Daniela, for those insightful and inspiring remarks. I'm going to provide a few highlights to the task force final report, and I'll use a few slides to make my points. But first, let me emphasize that this report would not have been possible without the extraordinary work of the task force, 20+ faculty members, as well as advisory board members and our fantastic graduate students. The report draws from research briefs that you can find on our website that go into detail about each of many of the points we make in the report. There's an excellent amount of work here. We are grateful to everyone for their contributions over time. I also want to acknowledge our funders for this work. You'll find a list of them in our report as well. Again, without these funders, this work would not have been possible over the last 2+ years. I also want to say, as Daniela did, that COVID obviously has been an enormous shock to the economy and to lives. And we, of course, started this work before COVID. But what we've learned over time is that we believe this work is actually more important, not less important, in the age of COVID. Some things have changed. Indeed, a year ago, we were talking about tight labor markets for the foreseeable future. That is no longer the case. But we think that a lot of the findings of this work remain true, and if anything, have been accelerated by the crisis. So we hope that our work here will help in thinking about rebuilding the economy and what's to come after the COVID crisis. So I'm going to start with 3 of the conclusions of the report. The first is that technological change simultaneously is eliminating work and at the same time creating work, exactly what Daniela said. In the end, what we believe, though, is that we're not going to run out of work. Clearly, the distribution of the effects of technology are uneven. We've seen the reduction of middle-skilled jobs due to automation, jobs in manufacturing, and administration, and clerical work, while we've seen an increase in jobs for those with higher educations and higher skill sets. This uneven distribution is part of the challenge for us going forward, and the one area where we believe that we need to make changes in our labor market institutions and policies. But the fact is that 60% or over 60% of the jobs in today's labor market did not exist in 1940. So there's an enormous amount of creativity and creation in new jobs, and our challenge is to try and train and make sure we have workers in a good position for those jobs. The second major conclusion of our work is to say that there are momentous impacts of technological change occurring now, but those are evolving gradually, not overnight. We see an acceleration of AI and robotics in phenomenal ways, but really the development, the adoption, and the deployment of those technologies is taking time, and we are just at the beginning of perhaps a 30 or 40-year cycle for those new technologies. We see this incremental pace of change when we look at some of the more well-known areas of AI use, for example, in autonomous vehicles or in the gripper, the robotic gripper that picks and packs packages. Both technologies that we believe are on the horizon, but will take time to both develop and to deploy into firms industries and regions around the country and the world. Indeed, a lot of our research took place in various industries, healthcare, manufacturing, warehousing, et cetera. What we found was actually the technologies that were having the most effect on the labor market were those that have been around for decades. The internet, mobile and cloud computing, mobile phones. These technologies that are much more mature are having a tremendous impact today, as will AI and robotics in the future. The third area where we see a major conclusion for us is around rising productivity and the ways in which rising productivity growth have not translated in increases in income for our typical workers. This next slide will help show exactly what we're talking about. Here we see productivity and median compensation growth and how they've diverged over time. The top line shows productivity growth aligned with the average growth of compensation for the average worker, and then median compensation for the typical worker. And what we see over the last 40 years is a divergence between these two lines. Median compensation for workers that represent about 60% of American workers, those without a four-year degree, has essentially stagnated and has been particularly hard for Blacks and Hispanics in the country. This is not the inevitable byproduct of new technologies or global forces. Many other countries have faced technological change and global competition, and their workers have fared better. This reflects instead policy choices. This slide for us perhaps explains why there is so much anxiety and uncertainty in society about technology, about robotics, because there is a genuine and legitimate fear about what innovation and new technologies will bring for the typical worker. Now let me turn to some of our recommendations. We have three broad areas for recommendations. And the first one is around the need for, following on this last slide, the need to translate productivity gains into better quality jobs. As I previously said, the quality of jobs in this country has been falling and not kept up with what we see in other countries. This slide, next slide, helps make that point, where we see the hourly earnings adjusted across multiple countries, including a lot of the US peer countries. What we see is that among rich countries, the US is one of the worst places for the less educated and for the low-paid worker. If you're in the US in a low-paid job, you're making about $10 an hour. In Canada, you'd be making about a third more, and you'd also have healthcare benefits. This is illustrative of a number of ways in which labor market institutions have not kept up in the US and where workers are falling behind. This includes reform in unemployment insurance, where we make recommendations about reforms to unemployment insurance. It includes also areas around the floor under which we have our labor market pay minimum wage, which is hit at the same rate today as it was in the 1950s in real terms. It also speaks to a need to strengthen labor laws to allow for innovation in new forms of worker representation and to expand collective bargaining and abilities to organize for those who are traditionally not covered by the US's antiquated and inadequate national labor laws. The second area we talk about for key areas for action involves investing and innovating in skills and training. As Daniela said, we understand this to be one of the pillars of our strategy going forward. Education and training are central to preparing the next generation and helping the current generation adapt to the changing labor market. Our report focuses particularly on those workers we believe are most vulnerable to technological change, those between high school and up to a four-year degree. And what we focus on are the multiple ways and the multiple examples that we've seen to help workers find the skills and find the pathways into middle-skilled jobs. The next slide provides an example that we use to talk about the many different ways we see education and training organizations working to help workers find these jobs. We use the healthcare case because it is a growing area where we see a lot of these jobs, job opportunities for middle-skilled workers. As we see here, this chart shows the earnings of nurses and medical transcriptionists, as well as health information technicians over the last 20 or so years. What's interesting about this is to see the earnings of nurses have grown and stayed steady over this time. The earnings for health information technicians have been growing steadily. And no surprise, perhaps, the medical transcriptionists have been declining as voice recognition and other AI technologies have replaced those jobs. The exciting news is our research found many examples at the community college level with labor market intermediaries, with apprenticeships, and importantly, with the private sector as partners to develop programs and training that help bring workers into jobs like these in the healthcare industry. What we find is a real need for more funding and for expanding these programs so they can grow to scale. There are numerous examples that we show in the report, including the Indian River State College in Florida, Quest in San Antonio, IBM P-Tech programs, all which have provided great examples of how we can get workers from high school right through to higher education, 2-year associate's degrees, and quality jobs and growing jobs like the ones you see here in healthcare. Our final point and area of recommendation is around expanding and shaping innovation. We've said from the beginning that what we know is that innovation both creates jobs, it grows wealth, it also is going to help the US help meet competitive challenges from abroad. One of the areas that we speak to that is important for investing in innovation is around R&D funding as a percentage of GDP in the US. As one sees from this chart over the last 60 plus years, overall US R&D expenditures have been staying pretty steady between public and private investments. What we are concerned about here is the decline in the federal funding line there. Federal funding and business funding of R&D have played different roles. Federal funding can take a longer term view, can provide patient capital, and can also focus on problems and challenges that have broader societal impact. So funding for R&D is one area that from the federal government, where we've seen so much of their investments have paid off in today's jobs and industries, is one area that we want to see greater activity by the US government. We also talk about tax policy and the importance of rebalancing the ways in which we incent investments in capital as well as labor. Let me close by saying a few words about where we think we are and where we should go. Right now, we would say that there's a fear that is palpable in this country about innovation, about the future. And this is a consequence of the diversion that we've seen between innovation and between labor market outcomes and opportunities. Our economic polarization, our political divisions, our distrust in institutions can be traced back to this challenge. And the reality is, if we deploy current technologies into our existing labor market system, we will get the same problematic outcomes. We argue in the report that we should reject false trade-offs between economic growth and having a strong and more secure labor market for our typical workers. Both goals are feasible. Other countries have done it better, and the US can do it as well. The majority of today's jobs had yet to be invented a century ago, and most of the work of the 21st century is being invented today. The job we have today is to build the work of the future that both spurs innovation and harnesses it to benefit workers and generate broader shared prosperity. Thank you. Now we'll move on to our first panel of the morning.